and welcome to the Connection Compass podcast. I'm your host, Andrea L Evans. Today I'm doing a solo episode talking about my recent reflections for the Summer Solstice, my birthday, and the International Day of Yoga. I talk about yoga as a connector and also about the London podcasting show, which I went to in May that I completely forgot to tell you about, and also the progress that's been made with the human-led impact project and why putting humanity first in everything that we do feels like such a radical idea in the modern context of the world. Hello, it's Andrea here. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. I am here doing a solo episode this week. I wanted to do that because there's a couple of things I want to share with you. Something that I forgot to tell you about was my experience at the London podcasting show. And I want to talk about some of the reflections that I've done recently, particularly as we've had the Summer Solstice and we've had the International Day of Yoga and my birthday also, and also about the Human-Led Impact Project and the Connection Compass framework and where we are up to with that, because it's all very exciting. So let's start with the podcasting show. I wanted to go for a couple of years now, and I have usually forgotten to get a ticket, or I haven't been able to go for some reason. And it was a bit of the same this year, if I'm honest. I remember seeing the advertisements for it and I kept thinking, oh, I must go. Then I completely forgot. Anyway, I had the opportunity to swap my non-working day, and I said yes and realised that it gave me a free day to go to the London podcast show. So I grabbed a ticket and painfully bought a rather expensive train ticket to go, and a very early train as well. But I did it. And, I was thinking to myself, I shouldn't have done this. I'm going to be so tired, because it was going to be a really long day. And I was just thinking, I'm going to be really tired. I've got work tomorrow and what am I going to do? And anyway, ignoring all that, I had a brilliant time. It was a brilliant experience. And definitely when the tickets come out next year, I will be going to both days because it was a fabulous experience. And if you've ever thought about going or you've seen it, it is quite daunting, because the weeks leading up to the podcasting show, obviously there's the app and you're getting notifications all week. Sign up for this, sign up for that, and this is on, and this is going to be at this stage. And to be honest with you, if you've never been before, you don't really know what it's all about. You have the timetable in front of you, but at that point, it just feels a little bit overwhelming. So I go and I went, and my ticket gave me access to some private seating areas. And I just made my way there to just gather my bearings, just look at the timetable, at what I wanted to have a look at. And I got talking to a couple of ladies, and one lady had been to the podcasting show before. She was one of the contributors and was part of hosting this seating area. And then there was another lady, it was her first time at the podcasting show, but she had been the day before as well. And she recognized that I looked a bit overwhelmed. And we just sat down and we had a chat, and she said to me, why don't you come with me to the first session? It will just set the tone for the day. It will give you confidence, and I think you'll really like the topic. And I was like, right, great, let's go. So I went along, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I felt so excited. it did give me confidence just going to that one session with somebody. It's because I knew then what kind of experience I was looking for and what topics would really interest me. I went to a couple of things that I didn't think I would never have thought of going before. So, the sponsors of the event were YouTube, and they did quite a few sessions on AI and using podcasts and how we can use AI to support us. Some really, really interesting speakers and just talking about the podcast experiences. And as you were listening, you recognized yourself within those experiences. And I remember thinking, yeah, I am meant to be here. I'm so glad that I came, even though I was doubting myself and worried I'd done the wrong thing. But it was well worth going. I mean, I got up at 4:15 to get the 5 to 6 morning train, and then I didn't get home till 10 o'clock. So it was a really, really long day, but a good day, and definitely, definitely going back to the whole thing next year. I love podcasting, and, if you listen to my conversation with Candace, you could really hear our enthusiasm in that conversation and passion for podcasting and getting people's stories out there and creating connections through the world. And it felt really good. I really felt like I'd belong there. And so the other things that I've done, we've got some brilliant guests coming up over the next couple of weeks. And we're focusing on building communities this series. So we've got some really interesting people coming on talking about how they are building communities, and from a variety of different ways as well. They're all unique in some way or another. I was really brave and I entered the Independent Podcast Awards this week as well. Even if something doesn't come of it, I wanted the experience to try and to get that recognition for the podcast as well. This is episode 80. 20 of those have been solo episodes, and we've had 60 amazing guests and who have been willing to share some really personal stories. And each one of those guests has a pre-recording chat. So we always chat beforehand. And it's really helpful because the person who's guesting gets to hear about my intention for the podcast and the understanding of it, the ethos, the values of it, and what I'm trying to achieve. I get to learn about them. Also, because people are sharing personal stories, it's an opportunity for me to ask if there's anything that they don't want to talk about. And it puts people at ease. That's why I do it. And also, podcast has to be right for them as well. And we talked a little bit about this, didn't we, with Candace last week, that sometimes you get approached by people on behalf of somebody else, and it's not often that they're a right fit for the podcast as well, or I'm not a right fit for them. And also, I have lots of pre-recording chats and not all of them manifest into episodes. And sometimes people change their mind, people forget, or they've got busy with something else and then they'll come back to you later on. Or some people just get busy with life and they don't come back. And, that's fine. That's what makes a great podcast. People that want to be there and want to be part of it. And sometimes it's just not the right time for people and they'll come back a little bit later on, which is nice. Or sometimes you don't hear from people again. So the podcast itself has now had over 5,000 downloads on Substack and over 2,000 on my hosting platform. On Substack, the majority of listeners are in the UK. The majority of listeners on Captivate are from the US. I have quite a heavy US listening base. And it's all great. I mean, it's all brilliant. And, both I've tracked both sets of stats continuously right from the beginning. Both of them, even though there's a difference, they always show an increasing trend. And actually, when I look at the Captivate figures, I mean, they are, you can just see them increasing every single time. And it's great. This is a small podcast. It's independently produced. I do everything myself, the editing, the overlay, the intro, the outro, all the social media posts and the pre-recording chats, the recording of the guests, and it keeps me busy. It's a busy podcast, but a good podcast. And I hope people out there just love it as much as I do. Since I was here last, we have had the Summer Solstice, we've had the International Day of Yoga, we've also had my birthday as well. And I usually do quite a detailed reflection at the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So I look back 6 months at time, see where I've been, see what I've worked through. And I find it really helpful because I think when we're moving through life and when we're working towards something, when we're just getting on with the day to day living, we spend time with our families, our friends, we do our house tours, and we don't really notice the changes that are happening, even the changes in our perceptions. So I think purposely sitting down and just going through everything that you've worked towards is really helpful. And then you get a really clear idea of what you need to do, where you need to go, and what your goals are for the next 6 months. I do reflect, well, I reflect quite a lot. I mean, I reflect through the week as well, but particularly at the solstices, I go quite deep, then do smaller reflections at the spring and the autumn equinoxes as well. You don't have to use the time of the solstice. You could do it on your birthday, 6 months from your birthday. You could do it quarterly, whatever's right for you, really. And I think, particularly for me, the thing that stood out the most is that the work of the Connection Compass framework and the Human Led Impact Project. I've talked about it a few times, probably since the last time I did a recording around the Connection Compass framework. That framework has developed so much and it's expanded. And I think that finally, when I come to talk about it in its entirety and how it's come together and what it's for and how we can use it, I think you'll be blown away. It's really detailed, it's really in depth, and I'm saying that you'll be blown away about it because I am. I can't believe what it's turned into. I just think it's incredible, and it's really been a blessing. I know it's caused me a lot of confusion at times, but I really get it now. I really understand it. And I can particularly see how this past year I've been preparing for this piece of work to come together. I've had to be in that right place. And so it's not just made up of two compasses now, but there's actually a third. And then within the framework, you can actually see some of the layers as well. So it's really exciting. And I think I told you last time Andrea Mellon, who was a guest on the podcast a few weeks ago. I'm working with her. She's supporting me to develop this work even further. So she talked about soul coding and the color theory, didn't she? And we're bringing lots of color into the framework as well. And it's just really exciting. That in itself, I mean, I'm quite intuitive anyway, but I think having the support of someone else, it's really helping me to lean further into that and to trust it and to have faith. And so the framework really is about returning to our authentic selves, about finding moments of stillness to connect with ourselves, being more authentic, being our true selves, becoming more at peace with ourselves, working towards things that we're really in alignment with, and what we learn there, we bring out into the world to change the world for the better. And I'm really looking forward to it all coming together and being able to present that to you. You know, I always say it just started with one moment in a training session that I was facilitating, and just realizing that as humans, we just needed so much more. We weren't holding space for what humans needed within the workplace. And even though I do say that is the starting point, you know, the truth is there are actually lots of different points that fed into that, or that I discovered over time, including my own disconnection. My own disconnection really started when I was in my late 20s, and from the outside, everything looked good. Outside looking in, everything looked good, but I was struggling with life on the inside, and life seemed to be falling through my fingers, and it didn't matter what I tried to do, I just couldn't quite grasp it. And one day I was at home, the house was quiet, when this strange feeling came over me and I couldn't breathe, and I was convinced that I was going to die, and of course I didn't. I'm still here. But it was my first panic attack, and those panic attacks stayed with me for a few years, and my whole days and weeks were just filled with panic attacks, and until I got some support, and I eventually made a decision to sell up my house, leave work and travel. The moment I made that decision, the panic attacks disappeared. It was like they were never there at all. It was very strange. And I had a blissful about 10 or 12 months without the panic attacks. But as I went back to work from traveling and I resumed education, the panic attacks also returned. And of course, I couldn't go traveling again. Well, I could have done, I suppose, but I wasn't really wanting to do that at the time. And I just settled into a new home, but I did need something to support me. And so I went to a yoga class not far from home. And it wasn't like the usual yoga classes that I'd been to before. They were away from a noisy gym, they were held in a quiet room, away from the noise of a busy gym. And it was a longer class, about 90 minutes, and allowing more time to deepen into the practice. And the first time I went, my anxiety was through the roof. I was struggling to conceal the panic attacks. It was winning for most of the class, yet I still managed to continue. It was like I knew on some level that a change was occurring. There was an answer that was coming. And towards the end of class, I did get it. It was like a light bulb moment. And it was that if I just focused on my breath, particularly deep yogic breathing, my panic attack would go away. And I had been told about focusing on my breath during panic attacks to manage the attacks. But this was something different. It was something deeper, and it really resonated with me. There was something about noticing me in a moment and what I needed, and that I was able to give it to myself, even if it was just as simple as focusing and leaning into my breath. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had full control of the panic attacks when they visited, and they did not have to control me. And it was a small win, not just for my confidence, but my own empowerment, and particularly at a time where I felt that there was none. And with practice, as my yoga practice continued, I began to change, and I felt more calm and more composed, stable, alive, tended to have more clarity. And through the years, my creativity began to return, and I had some experience of my creativity returning when I traveled, but I hadn't quite connected that to the panic attacks at all. But I see that when I'm not creative, I'm not in my own personal alignment to my true nature. And creativity is a very important part of keeping me well. And the impact of not having that, having creativity in my life, is that the panic attacks return. And as I was traveling, I had recaptured that part of me through writing and photography. But like I said, I just hadn't quite connected the two. And when I'd gone back to work, when I'd resumed it back into the education system, I completely left it all behind. I began to understand that creativity was an important part of my well-being, and it wasn't a nice to have, but a necessity, and that I needed it. And I wrote blogs, poetry, played with colour, made jewellery, and I grew a beautiful garden in the home where I settled in after travelling. All of these things were the foundation for what was to come for me, but I didn't know that then. And it was a learning curve of having to trust and have faith in myself. I always say it was yoga that reconnected me to that, and it brought me back to life again. And yoga still remains an important part of my life, and it will continue to be an important part of the connection compass as well for people that choose to engage in a yoga practice. And there was no force or pressure around this, and it was like through yoga, there was just a revealing and uncovering of all that was buried underneath, and that the person that I am was there all along. I just hadn't given myself the space or time before to see it. And the connection compass framework is about giving ourselves space and time and noticing. And it's allowing ourselves to put ourselves first, not all the time, but just enough for us to notice ourselves and what we need in our lives at a given moment, and to deepen that connection with ourselves, with each other, with the world that we live and work in, nature, our hearts, our hara, our intuition, and that we connect more deeply to the souls that we are and be our most authentic selves. So, more to come on that. And recently, I started a new Instagram to start to share the work of the Human Led Impact Project and the Connection Compass framework. And I remember I posted a reel quite near the beginning that the Human Led Impact Project holds a simple but radical idea. The Human Led Impact Project holds a simple but radical idea that our humanity comes first in every interaction, relationship, policy, and environment that we create and more. And I remember sitting staring at the Instagram grid and thinking, this is so stupid. Of course, humanity comes first in everything that we do. Is this not basic common sense? Why am I stating the bloody obvious as some radical thought? And I started panicking for a moment, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've got this so wrong. And then I stopped and I took a breath and I thought to myself, no, I haven't got this wrong at all. Because I started remembering all the times that I have put this work to one side, ready to leave it behind, only to read another story, hear of another tragic event, or another example of how our human selves are being eroded by external influences. And it's made me want to pick up the work again, because that's why I'm here doing this, to remind ourselves of the power that we hold within, not in an egotistical way, but in a quiet reverence to hold on to when the external noise becomes too loud and knocks us from our center. And we see this a lot. I see it in lots of posts. You can see that that inner power has been stripped from us, and there's too much reliance on our external influences. And it doesn't mean to say we can't be externally influenced, but we can do so with us being rooted into ourselves, so that no matter what happens, we always remain true and in alignment with our most authentic self, heart, and soul. And so it's because for a long time I've been observing this erosion of our humanity, chipping away at our worth and cheapening our existence. And I've thought it, I've felt it. Looking back, I first noticed it on the online dating scene, with our simple human desire to find love becoming a product to try and then discard when something better came along. People became nothing more than a profile. Connection became a choice. Choices became endless. And I found myself wondering what happened to curiosity and patience and the willingness to discover who someone might become over time. but people really struggle with stillness. You can see it all the time. You can observe it. You can sit down with a coffee and observe people around you, and they're distracted all the time. In yoga, at the times when I teach yoga, people find it very difficult to sit on a yoga mat because it's not comfortable, because we're not used to sitting still without a distraction. And we see this human erosion in lots of other fields in our lifetime. So in the workplace, we see our skills and talents and our ideas being pushed to the side for what feels safe, comfortable, because it's always been done that way. I see it in the diversity, equality, equity, whatever we're calling it this week, and inclusion forms, reducing our humanity with a tick box that some of us don't even fit into. I saw it in care, where care plans predetermined what the patient's needs were for 22 hours a day and call it quality care without considering a patient at their most vulnerable time of their life, that they might have other needs, that in that moment that they might not want to be asked those predetermined questions, but they might want to talk about something else that is bothering them. Yet there is little time afforded to that. And you're told that you can talk to them at the same time as filling out the form without little consideration, that that would mean you are not holding presence and space for that person in front of you. And I saw it during the pandemic when we facilitated people going on holiday, but couldn't quite allow a relative to spend more than an hour with their dying loved one. I don't think I will ever, ever get my head around that. And that we see it in and around us, ideologies that back our humanity into a corner, ungrounded and creating cracks in our trust and faith within each other. And, I am not an academic researcher. I'm not an expert in social psychology or construct. I am an observer, a learner, someone who questions, someone who notices patterns, join the dots, and contemplates meaning. And it was the connection compass framework that was created out of that. I'm someone who holds trust and faith in my own intuition. When something feels off, there is certainly something that is wrong, that feels off with our world right now. And it is beyond what we see at surface level. And when I ask, what do you think has got us here? I don't believe there's just one simple answer. I think it's multi-layered, complex, with lots of different elements playing out. We see solutions presented, but often it's from one angle instead of a system-wide approach. So if you think about the response to the Netflix series Adolescence, to show the film in schools to teach boys about misogyny and violence to girls. But I think I've mentioned this before, that it then doesn't deal with the other topics presented in the film, like female violence and aggression, school culture, the impact of how we treat each other as humans. And I think we can only go on ignoring this for so long, for what is staring us in the face. And as people, we are connected digitally, yet there are reports of increasing loneliness. The stats say that we hope for loving relationships, marriage, and family life, but we're reaching those milestones later, or sometimes not at all. And at the same time, birth rates are falling across the world, and social isolation is rising, not just in the young, but in the old as well. And perhaps these trends might invite us to ask, what does it mean to flourish as human beings? Beyond success and productivity, we all long for connection, belonging, purpose, and love. So how do we move forward? Well, it's hard to imagine at this moment how we can move on from here. But as the creator of the body of work around connection and living it myself, I believe that the solution is us as humans, remembering who we were before external influences determined our self-worth. I often think of the stories of young girls requesting cosmetic procedures to resemble their filtered versions that they see of themselves online. I think of the social media trends that may seem like fun, but scratch the surface and look a little deeper, and you will find that these trends encourage us to package our struggles personalities, emotional, mental wellness into something that can be consumed, categorized, and shared. And I have to ask, at what point did we begin to believe that who we naturally are was never quite enough, and that our self worth is embedded in the approval from others? Comparison and performance, as opposed to holding a deeper understanding of who we truly are. When did we forget, or perhaps there is the possibility that we never truly learned that the real validation that we are searching for is something that sits within us already? Not everyone will be ready, but perhaps it's time that we came home to ourselves and bring ourselves back into balance, not as two halves, but that of something deeper, a relationship between our body, mind, heart, and spirit. Perhaps many of the challenges that we see today are not separate problems at all, but symptoms of an imbalance across these 4 dimensions of human well-being. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Connection Compass. If you think this episode will help someone else, please leave a review. And remember to keep talking, keep connecting for a more interconnected world. See you next time.